They called my passion a glorified hobby. They thought my savings were their ATM. My daughter and granddaughter spent years using my love as emotional bait to secure a fortune. They were wrong. This is the story of how I smashed a ceramic pot, invested in a kiln, and used my vengeance to build a legacy. I didn't just save my money, I bought my freedom. Got a story of reckoning? Send your powerful tales to womenstoriess@sagmail.com. Before you hear my story, let me ask you something. What would you do if the person you loved most in this world humiliated you in front of everyone? What if you sacrificed your own peace and postponed your deepest ambitions to secure theirs, only to be mocked and discarded like you were an afterthought? I stayed quiet for too long. I rationalized their actions. I accepted the bare minimum. But when I found out the truth, not just the surface insult, but the deeper, colder intention, everything changed. Let me tell you how I went from being an invisible presence to an unforgettable force. Don't forget to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Aurora Marsh. I'm 68 years old. Widow, retired librarian, and dedicated amateur ceramicist. I've never craved the spotlight or a lavish existence. My life was spent quietly in a quaint, modest home overlooking the Atlantic in Marblehead, Massachusetts. My days were occupied with listening to the seagulls, shaping clay, and thinking of the people I loved, mostly Celine. Celine is my granddaughter. I raised her like a daughter, really. My own child, Blair, had her young, at 21. Blair was overwhelmed, navigating the complexities of single parenthood while trying to launch her career and hold down multiple jobs. So Celine spent her foundational years with me, finger painting on old newsprint in my sunroom, riding her vintage scooter on the uneven brick pathways, helping me collect driftwood for small art projects that sat innocently by the window. She used to call me Rory, not Grandma, not Granny, just Rory. When she was little, I was her whole dependable haven. Years passed. She blossomed. The world, with its high-speed connections and constant digital clamor, took over. Expensive, unnamed brand tablets replaced our storybooks. Viral trends and ephemeral online communities replaced those focused, quiet sunroom sessions. And I just stood back, deeply proud of her sharp wit and confidence, but quietly heartbroken, watching her life drift into a current I could barely recognize or participate in. But my love for her was an unchanging force. I never stopped. And for 15 years, I performed a labor of silent devotion she never knew about. Every month, I put aside whatever I could salvage from my meager fixed pension, my small earnings from substitute teaching, grocery savings, even delaying necessary dental work to meticulously build a fine arts scholarship fund for her. I knew she dreamed of attending the Pratt Institute in New York, the prestigious, fiercely competitive, and astronomically expensive institution that aspiring designers idolize. Tuition was crippling, living expenses were prohibitive, but I believed in her dream with a certainty that exceeded her own. Even though she'd traded her childhood art supplies for fashion blogs and unnamed brand accessories years ago, even though she rarely mentioned art school anymore, even though she rarely visited unless she needed a loan or a lift, still, I believed. And for her 20th birthday, I wanted to give her something that surpassed money. I wanted to give her a tangible memory, a resonant echo of who she used to be, of the genuine connection we once shared. So, I crafted her a gift. Not just a painting, but a ceramic vessel, a memory shaped in fired clay. I spent months on it. Every careful etching, every layer of glaze, every firing cycle was a silent prayer. I sculpted the form of the old weathered bird feeder in our backyard, the one she loved when she was 5. The German shepherd we had, Zeus, who was her beloved shadow until he passed away when she was 12. The deep crimson and gold colors of the autumn leaves outside her window every October. I wrapped it carefully in sturdy tissue paper, tied with a silver bow. I slipped a little handwritten card inside that said, "May your future creations be as honest and bright as the little girl you used to be." I smiled as I placed it gently in the passenger seat of my old sedan, heart full, hopeful. I imagined her face dissolving into tears of nostalgia and gratitude when she opened it. I imagined her hugging me, maybe even telling me she loved me just for the memory. I imagined wrong. The party was a world away from the birthdays I used to throw for her. Those small, warm gatherings with store-bought cake and paper chain decorations hung with tape and pure love. No. This was an affair of gloss and spectacle. Her mother, Blair, had rented a chic, contemporary venue downtown, complete with an open bar, an extravagant dessert table, and a DJ spinning the latest unnamed brand chart toppers. Celine had a designated gift showcase, a minimalist white stand stacked high with sleek, fancy boxes and designer wrapping paper. Everything screamed expense. Everything, that is, except for me. I stood there in my best but still slightly mended tweed jacket, clutching the ceramic vessel like it was a fragile relic. No one truly registered my arrival. That was fine. I wasn't there for the audience. Celine wore a stunning, emerald green, unnamed brand cocktail dress and heels that made her look impossibly tall. She drifted from group to group, her laughter sharp and loud, taking selfies and ensuring her large circle of friends, who barely looked in my direction, were entertained. Eventually, Blair noticed me and managed a rapid, almost clinical smile. "Oh, you made it, Aurora," she said, using my first name, as if I were a distant acquaintance and not the woman who had spent countless hours teaching her child to read. I held out the tissue-wrapped gift, a gentle smile on my face. "Where should I—" "You can just toss it with the others," she said, already pivoting away to signal the caterer. But I didn't. A quiet instinct told me to wait. I needed to hand it to Celine myself. I needed her to see the effort in my eyes as she unwrapped it. When she finally moved to the gift showcase to commence the grand opening, the crowd tightened around her. Phones were raised to record every moment for social media. She tore through boxes, vouchers for high-end spa treatments, the newest unnamed brand smartwatch, cash envelopes, expensive jewelry. Then she reached mine. I watched her pause. My wrapping wasn't glossy. It was humble, handmade, and tactile. "Oh, this one's from my Rory," she announced to the camera with a noticeably forced, overly sweet tone. She unwrapped the paper, opened the box, and held up the ceramic vessel. A moment of silence. Then came the laugh. "Are you serious?" she snorted, holding it up for everyone to inspect as if it were a joke prop. "A clay pot? With little dog and bird feeder shapes? That's it? Wow. Should have just bought a gift card, Rory. This must have been cheaper than a real present." The kids around her exchanged smirks and muffled titters. Someone stage whispered, "Garage sale find vibes, I guess." Blair threw me a quick, tight-lipped look of acute discomfort, but offered no defense. I stood completely paralyzed. My hands were stiff, hanging uselessly at my sides. "It's nostalgic, I guess," Celine added with a dismissive shrug, setting the vessel down unceremoniously, propping it against the base of the stand like a forgotten piece of cheap decor. Everyone instantly shifted their attention to the next expensive box. No one saw my face. That's the core experience of being invisible. No one notices when the pain starts to sink in. I turned and walked back to the entrance. Each step felt like I was physically dragging 15 years of hope behind me. Years of quiet devotion. Years of bills paid by going without. Years of whispered pleas over my budget, just so she could have that expensive summer program or the designer pencil set. I got into the driver's seat of my sedan, shut the door quietly, and kept the engine off. I didn't weep or sob loudly. I just stared at my hands gripping the steering wheel, watching as one single searing tear slid down and landed right on my old, tarnished wedding band. It was then a cold, shocking realization hit me. That ceramic vessel was the most honest, painstakingly created piece of my love I had to give. And she didn't just reject the object, she rejected the love, the effort, and me. I knew I would never, ever forget that sound, that laugh. When I arrived home that night, I didn't bother to switch on the lights. I simply walked into the kitchen, placed my handbag on the counter, and stood there in the profound dark. The silence of the small apartment wrapped around me like a heavy, familiar coat. No laughter, no pulsating music, no sharp voices telling me to be more present or to smile more. No one asking if I was okay. I moved to the cupboard, took out a favorite chipped porcelain mug, filled it with plain tap water, and sat down at the small dining table. This was the same table where I used to help Celine with her school projects, where she would sit cross-legged, messy ponytail falling over her shoulder, asking me to help her find the perfect glaze color for her early clay experiments. I glanced toward my work corner. My potter's wheel stood bare. The table beside it, cluttered with tiny tools, containers of slip, and bags of clay, sat untouched since the moment I finished her birthday gift. That vessel. It took me months of aching joints and blurred evening vision. Weeks of waking up at 3 a.m. because I had thought of one more perfect etching to add to the surface. She called it cheap. And they all laughed. I stared down at my mug. My tired reflection was barely visible in the still water. Then, with a sudden, decisive movement, I stood up, walked to the hallway, and opened the antique writing desk where I kept the folder labeled Scholarship Fund Celine. It was a thick file, bulging with every receipt, bank statement, and printout from the savings account I'd built slowly over 15 long years. Every automatic deposit, every small transfer, every sacrifice was documented. I'd forgone new shoes. I'd canceled the subscription to the local paper. I stopped going to the expensive aromatherapy sessions. Every time I placed that money aside, I whispered a mantra. It'll be worth it. She's worth it. I turned on my old sluggish laptop, the one I used only for bills. I logged into the online banking portal, typed in my ancient, reliable password, and waited. The balance blinked on the screen, a substantial, life-changing 5-figure sum. I stared at it for a long, quiet time. I knew the precise cost of every single dollar. Then I clicked transfer, not to Celine, not to the official scholarship savings, to me, to my personal checking account. I watched the progress bar crawl slowly across the screen, as if the bank was giving me one last chance to reconsider, but I didn't. Not this time. Transfer complete. Balance, 0 worries. The next morning, the reality of the previous night's actions was strange and cold. I shuffled into the kitchen, my worn fleece slippers scuffing against the wooden floorboards, and stared at the old laptop like it was holding a secret. The bank portal confirmed it. The savings account was empty. the transfer was real. The money was now unequivocally in my personal name, not earmarked for anyone else's future. I'd braced myself to feel a crushing wave of guilt, or at least a deep, wrenching sadness, but neither arrived. There was no guilt, just a strange, unfamiliar quiet residing in my chest. It wasn't peace, not yet. It felt more like the absence of long-standing chaos, a blank space where years of anxious sacrificing used to reside. That same afternoon, the digital tether yanked. I received a text message. "Hi, Rory. Can I stop by today? Miss you." I stared at the screen for a long, calculating time. She hadn't used the tender nickname Rory in months, possibly longer than a year. The timing was too sharp, too precise to be coincidence. I didn't respond immediately. Exactly 2 hours later, there she was, Celine, standing on my porch with a decorative box of meticulously crafted, overly sweet French macarons from that notoriously expensive, unnamed brand boutique downtown, the kind I could only ever afford to admire longingly through the window when we passed by. Her sleek, dark hair was impeccably styled, her makeup was notably lighter, and her smile was just a shade too wide, too effusive to feel genuine. "Rory," she chirped, her voice a practiced melody, wrapping her arms around me in a sudden, unexpected embrace before I could even formulate a reaction. My body instantly stiffened. My emotional memory was sharp, recalling the party, her voice echoing, full of condescension in front of her peers, her laughter stinging like shards of cold ceramic. But I forced myself to endure the hug. She smelled of expensive, unnamed brand floral perfume and overpowering sugar. Nothing about her smelled like the simple comfort of childhood anymore. "I was just thinking about you," she said, gliding into the kitchen with the casual confidence she hadn't exhibited here in years. "I wanted to apologize for the party. Honestly, I was just completely overwhelmed and, well, a little drunk. I truly didn't mean what I said." She sat down at the small dining table, folding her hands neatly. Her acrylic nails were flawless. Her unnamed brand phone glowed softly in her lap. "I definitely shouldn't have said that about the ceramic vessel," she added, keeping her gaze soft and steady. "It was incredibly sweet of you to make it. It's actually really beautiful. I put it in my bedroom, actually." I nodded slowly, trying to decipher the true emotion in her eyes. Was any of this real? I desperately wanted it to be real. I missed the genuine connection we once shared. "I know I haven't been around," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Things have been insane with my fashion blog and my friends, but I'm here now. I missed us." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes shimmered, mirroring the soft refraction of a tear that never quite fell. "I've been thinking a lot about the Pratt Institute," she said, her tone suddenly earnest. "About the application and the future. I know the fund is, complicated with the tuition being so insane now, but I just want to be close to you again. I'm not here for the money, Rory, I swear, I need my anchor back." The words wrapped around me like a comforting, dangerously familiar blanket. Soft, persuasive, and lethal. I felt a tight knot in my chest begin to loosen its grip. Maybe she is growing up. Maybe the shame of the party did awaken something genuine inside her. Maybe I'm the one who has been too harsh. After all, she is young. They make mistakes. We have all been young and foolish. "I'll think about things, Celine," I told her gently, my voice wavering slightly despite my best effort. "But I am glad you're here." She offered the big, genuine smile then, The one I remembered from when she was 7, when she used to draw me pictures of impossible geometric shapes and write, "I love you, Rory," in shaky crayon script. We ate the sugary macarons. She stayed for a light dinner. She even insisted on helping me wash the few dishes and asked detailed questions about my latest ceramic glaze experiments. She brought up specific childhood memories, the old bird feeder, Zeus, the autumn colors. My heart, against my own better judgment, began to believe again, to soften. Later that night, I pulled out the Scholarship Fund Celine folder again. I didn't initiate any transfers back, but I thought about it. I thought about it more persistently than I wanted to admit. Maybe I was wrong to act so quickly. Maybe she has learned a valuable lesson. Or maybe, just maybe, I wanted her love so fiercely that I was willing to be wrong, just to have her near. I didn't sleep well. My mind relentlessly replayed her solemn declaration. "I'm not here for the money, Rory. I swear." And yet, the only thing louder than her comforting words was the persistent echo of that birthday party, the sound of her friends' snickers, and her cold, cheap shot at my efforts. But I pushed the doubt deep down, burying it under layers of hopeful yearning. Because sometimes you would rather believe a beautiful, comforting lie that feels like love than accept a sharp, painful truth that leaves you utterly alone. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the cold, hard realization hit me. The kind of day where the sea fog hung thick over Marblehead, making everything feel muted, ordinary, and irrelevant. Celine had come over that morning with her sleek, unnamed brand laptop and a look of practiced urgency. She claimed she needed my help troubleshooting a finicky printer to submit a difficult scholarship application form, a detail she knew would appeal to my nurturing side. She rushed off after a quick lunch, claiming she was late to meet a group of friends in the city. I stayed in the kitchen, washing the few dishes we had used, idly humming a gentle tune from an old jazz record we both used to love decades ago. I remember thinking, this is it. This is healing. We are genuinely rebuilding the bridge. Then I wandered into my small home office. Her laptop was still there, open and humming softly, the screen still glowing with activity. My first instinct was just to close it, to simply click the lid shut and send her a quick text to remind her. But the active screen, a chat window, caught my eye. It was a messaging application I didn't recognize, its interface minimalist and private. At the top, the header read, "Celine chatting with Finn M." My gut, trained by 6 decades of experience, told me to step away immediately. It warned me that nothing good could come of it, but a deeper, more primal instinct, a protective one, hardened by years of unspoken sacrifice, compelled me to read. The last message sent from Celine hit me with the physical force of a slap, stealing my breath. "Don't worry, she's totally falling for it." I've been doing the whole sweet routine, cried a little, told her I missed our bond. Classic emotional bait. She always melts with that whole family first crap. Works every time. My hands, holding the edge of the desk, began to tremble uncontrollably. Another message blinked below it, freshly typed, ruthless in its calculation. "Just need, 2 more visits." She's already talking about putting the fund back. I know I have her. Told you. She's completely predictable. I'll be in NYC by fall. Manifesting that Pratt acceptance. I stared at the words. They weren't merely cruel. They were meticulously calculated. This was not a mistake born of youth. It was not a slip of the tongue fueled by wine. It was a premeditated script. Everything, The sudden tear-glossed visits, the unsolicited hugs, the nostalgic stories about Zeus and the autumn colors, every soft whisper, every bakery macaron, was a piece of stagecraft written to manipulate my deepest emotion. I closed the laptop slowly, deliberately, like shutting a casket on a dearly held illusion. The grief was immediate and overwhelming, but this time, it was grief for a person who never truly existed. The girl I raised was annihilated. The silence that followed was not the calm after a storm, but the cold stillness of absolute certainty. I have no clear recollection of how long I stood there in my small home office. It could have been minutes, or it might have been an hour. My legs finally gave way, carrying me unsteadily to the old armchair, the laptop, now closed, resting heavily on my lap, though the words still burned my eyes as if the screen were blazing. Her voice, her sweetness, every Rory, I missed you. It all played in my head like a broken, mocking record, and every single word sounded faker, colder, and more predatory now than the last. I felt a profound chill, as if the life-giving warmth had been brutally switched off. How had I not seen it? How had I, a woman who had taught resilience and patience for decades, fallen for it again? I looked at her messages, mentally picturing them peppered with frivolous emojis and emphatic punctuation marks, realizing they hadn't been written by the girl I raised. She sounded like a stranger, worse, a cold, tactical opportunist, targeting my deepest maternal instincts, manipulating my heart, using love as a precision weapon. I wanted desperately to scream, but the sound was trapped in the cold, hollow space where my heart used to beat. Instead, I closed the laptop slowly, deliberately, like shutting a casket on a dearly held illusion. The grief was immediate and overwhelming, but this time, it wasn't grief for a person I had lost. It was grief for a person who never truly existed. The version of Celine in my head, the sweet, curious child with sand on her knees, who once told me I was her favorite person in the whole, wide world. That girl was annihilated. Maybe she had been gone for far longer than I had ever allowed myself to admit. I sat in the silence for the remainder of the afternoon, letting the sickening truth fully permeate my being. This was not just a case of simple, careless disappointment. It was a sophisticated, planned betrayal. It was intentional. I walked to my ceramic work corner later that evening, pulled the cloth off the finished piece, the vessel she had so carelessly mocked at the party. There it was, our story set in fired clay. The old bird feeder, the loyal dog Zeus, the autumn colors, and all I could see now was the word she had used, cheap. But for me, it was never about price. It was about memory, about effort, about love. And I finally understood something vital. She hadn't merely rejected the vessel, she had rejected me, the giver, and the life I represented. I whispered to the clay, my voice steady this time. You're not the one who's worthless, my dear, and neither am I. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I just sat in my old plush velvet armchair in the living room, a hand-knitted shawl wrapped tightly around my shoulders. The apartment was dark, except for the faint, diffused yellow glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains. It was striking how quiet pain could be, how it didn't always erupt in screams or sobs. Sometimes it just sat beside you, breathing in sync, waiting for you to acknowledge its undeniable presence. I kept hearing her words in my head, a relentless, painful loop. She always melts with that whole family first crap. I thought of all the times I had melted. When Blair slammed doors and called me outdated, I forgave it. When Celine started visiting less and less, I convinced myself she was just incredibly busy with her ambitious life. When I was forgotten during major holidays, I baked my specialty lemon bars and dropped them off anyway. I melted because love had made me soft, because I believed absolutely in forgiveness, in unwavering loyalty, in infinite second chances. But now, I saw my softness for what it had become: a target, a vulnerability that was exploited. I had spent a lifetime sacrificing small, crucial pieces of myself so that no one I loved would ever feel the need to leave me. I gave until there was nothing left. And then I found ways to give more. And for what? So my granddaughter could laugh behind my back, so I could be meticulously manipulated into handing over my life savings like some pathetic, gullible, lonely old woman. I felt a kind of rage ignite that night. Not a loud, chaotic, destructive rage. It was a quiet, intensely focused, tempered kind of fury. The kind that sharpens your resolve, that violently peels the wool off your eyes and forces you to confront who you've allowed yourself to become and who you are definitively done being. Around 4 a.m., I finally got up. I walked to the ceramic vessel she called cheap and stood in front of it for a long, quiet moment. The memories encased in that clay no longer hurt. They were not bruises anymore. They were irrefutable proof. Proof that I had loved completely, that I had given my absolute best, that I had been intensely real even when they were not. I whispered to the art, "You are not going into a closet. Not ever again." And I meant it with my whole new heart. I turned to an old shelf, pulled out an old professional-grade camera, a forgotten relic from my photography days before I became Rory. I took a high-resolution, carefully lit picture of the ceramic vessel. Then I sat down at my desk, turned on my computer, and typed. I found a small, niche online community for emerging ceramics and design artists. Over 60. A quiet, supportive corner of the internet where people posted their work and exchanged encouragement. My fingers trembled slightly, but I uploaded the photo. In the caption box, I wrote, "This ceramic vessel was called cheap by someone I love, but it was crafted with everything I had left. Every shard of glass is a memory. Every carefully shaped curve, a piece of my heart. Maybe it's not enough for some people, but it was everything to me." I hit post. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few sympathetic comments, a dozen likes. But it wasn't about attention. It was about finally using my voice, not just my clay, to tell an uncomfortable but necessary truth. I left the computer humming and went back to the living room, made a fresh cup of tea, and sat in the quiet. For the first time in a very long, long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt awake. When I finally woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming aggressively through the harbor-facing window, casting long, golden lines across the wooden floor. My body felt stiff, but strangely energized, like something fundamental inside me had irrevocably shifted. I shuffled over to the computer, not anticipating any major changes. Then I saw it. The screen was nearly blinding with notifications, hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, shares climbing rapidly. The vessel I posted, that deeply personal piece, had caught fire overnight. It wasn't just a flicker of sympathy. People were seeing it. Truly, deeply seeing it. I clicked into the comments section, my heart rate accelerating. This made me weep. The emotion is palpable. Whoever called this cheap doesn't understand the language of sacrifice. Do you sell replicas? I want this sentiment in my home. This isn't just art. It's courage. Please tell me you're exhibiting somewhere. My head felt flushed and dizzy. I scrolled further. Messages had started pouring into my private inbox. Direct messages from complete strangers, women mostly. Women who were mothers, grandmothers, daughters, who said they saw their own overlooked history in my painful anecdote, who admitted they'd been called too sentimental, too giving, too soft. But this art, this story, was power. And then, one message sliced through the digital noise and stopped my breath entirely. Hi, Aurora. I'm Dana Rossi, a gallerist and curator for a small, independent space in the Boston Gallery District. Your piece stopped me cold. Would you seriously consider exhibiting it? We would be immensely honored to feature The Rejected Gift. I read the message 4 times, my fingers trembling on the mousepad. Boston. A gallery. I looked back at the ceramic vessel, still leaning quietly against the wall near the dining room, half in shadow. The bird feeder, the dog Zeus, the autumn colors. My quiet memories had been made public. My deepest hurt had been transformed, in the eyes of others, into something profoundly beautiful. I answered with trembling hands, a new, fierce certainty settling in my core. Yes, Dana, I'd be honored too. Within hours, more messages arrived. Requests from small regional art magazines, independent bloggers, even an inquiry from a woman who ran a major, unnamed brand online platform, asking if I would do a feature story on the unseen artist. It was as if I had thrown a single piece of clay into the Atlantic and somehow triggered a powerful tidal wave of recognition. Later that afternoon, Dana, the curator from Boston, called me directly. She said she was arranging to drive up to Marblehead herself to pick up the piece. I want to treat this piece with the care it deserves, she told me, her voice ringing with sincerity. It's not just ceramics. It's a story people are starved to hear. She asked about the title for the show's placard. I hesitated for a moment, then I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. Call it The Rejected Gift, I said. Dana paused, then said, Perfect. Absolutely perfect. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and let the realization wash over me. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Celine anymore. It was purely about me reclaiming the parts of my soul I had given away too freely. It was about taking the love they dismissed and turning it into something untouchable, something undeniable. That night, I didn't just sleep soundly. I dreamed of vibrant color, of blinding light, and of finally, truly being seen. The drive from Boston to Marblehead was a little over an hour, and Dana Rossi arrived precisely at 10 a.m. the next day. She was not what I expected a high-end gallery curator to look like. Instead of severe black attire, she wore a chic but comfortable linen suit and had a friendly, open expression. She was in her late 40s, vibrant and direct, with eyes that saw beyond the surface. Dana surveyed my small seaside home with genuine admiration, not judgment. She paused at the window, taking in the Atlantic view. This is a beautiful space, Aurora. It breathes. I offered her coffee, but she politely declined, her focus immediately shifting to the ceramic vessel. I had placed it on a pedestal I usually used for drying clay, under the clearest light. Dana approached it slowly, circling the piece like a connoisseur before a masterwork. She gently ran her fingers over the smooth, glazed form. "The control is extraordinary," she murmured. "The way you captured the texture of the old bird feeder, the weight in the figure of Zeus. And the colors, that deep crimson and gold. It's technically excellent, but what makes it art is the history you've fired into it. It's a love letter that was returned unopened. Her profound understanding of the piece, without me having to explain the agonizing details, brought tears to my eyes. This woman, a complete stranger, saw more of my truth than my own family ever had. "I have to confess, Dana," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I almost put this money back. The scholarship fund. Celine came here, my granddaughter. She used all the right words. She was the sweet, small girl again. I almost believed her." I then told her the whole unvarnished story, not just about the party, but about the text messages. The cold, calculated, classic emotional bait line. I spared myself no humiliation. Dana listened without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't offer cheap platitudes. She simply took my hand. "Aurora," she said firmly, "you have been operating from a place of infinite love for people who were only operating from a place of finite need. They see you as a renewable resource. Taking that money back was not an act of revenge, it was an act of self-preservation. And turning that pain into this piece is an act of alchemy. Do not, for 1 second, regret putting yourself first." She then pulled out a sheaf of papers. "I've brought the contract. We're offering a significant commission percentage, better than standard for an emerging artist. The exhibition will be titled, as we discussed, The Rejected Gift, a collection of found truths." I signed the papers. It was the first time I had signed anything in 15 years that wasn't a bill or a form related to someone else's life. The feeling was electric, a silent, internal revolution. Dana carefully packed the ceramic vessel into a custom-built, padded travel crate she had brought. Before leaving, she looked at me again. "And Aurora, that money you saved? It's yours. What are you going to use it for?" I looked around my small, familiar, yet suddenly restrictive home. "I'm going to finish the work I deferred, and I'm going to travel. I'm going to buy the clay and the kiln I always wanted." Dana smiled knowingly. "Good. The world is ready for you, Aurora. The canvas is yours." The very next day, I received a phone call from Celine. Her tone was demanding, not sweet. "Rory, what is going on? My mom, Blair, tried to deposit the next scholarship installment and the account is empty. Completely zeroed out. Is this some kind of technical glitch? Did you forget to transfer it from your main account?" Her voice was rising, impatience overriding her carefully constructed facade of affection. The mask was slipping, and it felt strangely liberating. "No, Celine," I said calmly, my voice steady. "It's not a glitch. I transferred the funds to my own personal account." A beat of stunned silence on the line, then a harsh, incredulous laugh, reminiscent of the one at her party. "To your account? For what? You're retired, Rory. What do you need a 5-figure sum for? To buy more old tea towels?" I felt the old instinct to apologize, to mitigate, to explain. I crushed it. "That money was my life savings, built over 15 years, with personal sacrifice," I stated, keeping my tone factual, devoid of emotion. "It was initially intended for your dream, but since that dream seems to have been replaced by a focus on viral fame and unnamed brand accessories, I decided to redirect it towards my own deferred dream, my art." "Your art?" she scoffed. "You mean that cheap clay pot you made? Are you serious? You're choosing a hobby over my entire future at Pratt." Her calculated facade was now completely shattered, revealing the raw, entitled anger beneath. "That money was mine, Rory. It was promised. How could you be so selfish? After everything I told you about missing you. The promise was conditional on genuine need and respect, Celine, I replied. And you made your true feelings about my sacrifices and my worth very clear at your birthday party. Furthermore, I read your messages to Finn M about using emotional bait and calling me predictable. That stopped her cold. The silence this time was truly heavy. The air crackled with her shock. You read my private messages? She stammered, the realization hitting her like ice water. How dare you? That is an invasion of privacy, Rory. That's sick. And using your grandmother's love as emotional bait to secure her life savings is not? I challenged, not raising my voice, but letting the quiet force of the question land. I think we are done with the subject of who is manipulative and who is truly sick, Celine. The account is empty. The money is gone. I am using it for my future now. Please don't call me again. I didn't wait for her reply. I gently, deliberately hung up the phone. My hand felt lighter. It was the end of a long, humiliating performance, and I was finally off stage. The afternoon following the call felt strange, a mixture of exhilarating freedom and residual guilt. I walked around the house, feeling the physical space expand. I was no longer a resource to be tapped. I was just Aurora. I returned to my laptop, but this time, not to check bank balances or look at my pension statements. I opened a high-end art supply website. This was the fun part. The money that had represented sacrifice for 15 years now represented potential. I typed in the first item, the L&L Easy Fire Kiln, a top-of-the-line electric kiln, large enough for serious work, complete with digital controls and perfect insulation. I had coveted this model for a decade, always rationalizing it away. Too expensive, too self-indulgent. The scholarship fund needs it more. I checked the price, added it to the cart, and typed in my home address. Next, I bought a massive order of specialty clay bodies, smooth porcelain, rough stoneware, and deep red earthenware. The textures I had only dreamed of working with. I added a new modern potter's wheel, replacing the loud, sputtering 1970s model I currently owned. I treated myself to a full kit of specialized glazing chemicals and brushes, including the impossibly expensive, unnamed brand Japanese brush set I had admired in magazines. My final purchase was an airline ticket, a round-trip flight to London. I booked a 7-day trip to visit the Victoria and Albert Museum to study the historical ceramic collections there, a trip I had fantasized about since my librarian days. I booked a small, charming boutique hotel near the Thames. I checked the total, a substantial chunk of the life savings, but still leaving a very comfortable retirement cushion. I entered my credit card details, confirmed the payment, and watched the order confirmed page load. The transaction wasn't just money changing hands. It felt like a violent, necessary shift in my entire cosmic order. I wasn't buying objects. I was buying back my time, my ambition, and my self-respect. I closed the laptop and walked to the window, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors even richer than the glazes I had just ordered. It was a beautiful view, but for the first time, I wasn't just observing it. I was a participant. I was an artist. I was a woman on the verge of a true beginning. Aurora Marsh was ready to rise. The following weeks were a whirlwind of deliveries, a continuous stream of large brown boxes disrupting the quiet order of my seaside home in Marblehead. The professional kiln arrived, a sleek, humming behemoth that required an electrician and a minor rearrangement of the garage to accommodate its size and power. The new potter's wheel, silent and perfectly balanced, was a joy to use, a stark contrast to the rattling old machine it replaced. Crates of high-grade clay and jars of expensive, vibrant glazes filled my small studio space. The sight of all this new, beautiful equipment was profoundly affirming. For years, I had believed that self-care meant a quiet, frugal existence. Now, self-care was this: investing in my talent and my joy. The silence from Celine and Blair was absolute. After my firm hanging up of the phone, there were no further calls, no texts, no emails demanding explanations. It was the silence of people whose primary resource has been abruptly cut off. It wasn't respectful distance, it was strategic withdrawal. And in that absence of manipulative noise, my own internal creative voice finally found room to breathe. I threw myself into work, channeling the intense, cold fire of betrayal into my hands. The new series I began was inspired by my trip to London, which I had already taken and returned from, refreshed and bursting with inspiration. I decided to call the collection, tentatively, Fragments of a Broken Promise. Each piece was deliberately imperfect, featuring sharp, cracked lines and beautiful, deep glazes that seemed to bleed across the surface. I wasn't trying to make pretty things. I was making honest things. I spent days measuring, mixing, and calculating for the new glazes, colors I had researched at the V&A Museum. I was meticulous, professional, and completely immersed. I felt the passion of my 20-year-old self, refined by the discipline of my 68-year-old hands. During this period, Dana Rossi kept in close contact. She sent updates about the gallery space, the marketing plan, and the immense positive reception the online story of The Rejected Gift was receiving. The digital interest had snowballed. The piece was featured on several major independent art platforms, generating buzz far beyond the Boston region. "You're not just an artist, Aurora," Dana told me during one phone call. "You're a narrative. People are tired of manufactured perfection. They relate to real pain transformed. The vessel is going to be the centerpiece of our spring collection." I looked at the ceramic vessel, which had been shipped out the week before. It was no longer a symbol of my humiliation, but a catalyst. It had bought me a kiln, clay, a ticket to London, and most importantly, it had bought me respect. My renewed peace was shattered a week before the exhibition opening when a knock hammered violently on my front door. It wasn't the polite tap of a neighbor. It was the heavy, impatient sound of entitlement. I opened the door to find both Blair, my daughter, and Celine standing there. Blair looked disheveled and frantic, wearing an expensive but wrinkled jacket. Celine, surprisingly, looked tearful, a contrast to the icy composure she had displayed during our last exchange. "We need to talk, Rory. Now," Blair demanded, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation, stepping onto the clean floor with her muddy boots. "The conversation is over, Blair," I said, my voice firm. "And you need to remove your shoes." Blair ignored me, staring at the new boxes and equipment stacked near the garage door. "Where is it? Where's the money? What did you do? You've drained Celine's future for what? A glorified hobby shop." Celine stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Rory, I know I said things, but you can't punish me like this. I got my letter from Pratt this week. I got in, Rory. The acceptance is conditional on the first semester tuition deposit, which is due in 10 days. And the account is empty. The money isn't there." She burst into dramatic, performative tears, pulling out a large, wrinkled envelope bearing the prestigious logo of the Pratt Institute. She held it out to me like a talisman. "You knew how important this was," Celine wept. "You promised all those years. You're ruining my life over a stupid, ugly ceramic pot that no one wanted. The word ugly, the unrepentant, careless cruelty of it, cut through the last vestiges of my self-doubt. I took a deep breath, consciously slowing my heart rate. I didn't reach for the letter. "Congratulations on your acceptance, Celine," I said, my voice measured and completely devoid of warmth. "It's a magnificent achievement. It proves I was right to save that money for so long, believing in your talent." Blair cut in, waving her arms in exasperation. "Then give it back. Transfer it now, Rory. You're her grandmother. This is cruel and unnecessary." "The money is gone," I stated simply. "It was used to finance my own deferred artistic career. The new kiln, the supplies, a major research trip to London. It is invested in Aurora Marsh." "But what about us?" Celine pleaded, her tears momentarily drying into confused anger. "What about me? I'm your family." I looked directly into her eyes, seeing the transactional calculations still simmering beneath the distress. "You forfeited the right to that resource when you chose to use my love as emotional bait and publicly mocked my 15 years of sacrifice," I replied. "The terms of that contract were love and respect. You broke both. I simply closed the account." I motioned toward the door. "You have 10 days to find alternative financing for your first deposit. I am no longer your default fund. Now, I have work to do. You need to leave my house." Blair, who had been seething in the background, finally stepped between us, her voice low and menacing. "You think this is over? You're a lonely old woman, Rory. Who are you going to leave this money to when you die? Your cat? You need family." "I have already secured my future, Blair," I replied, standing my ground. "And as of this moment, I have a wider community of artists who see me and value my work more than you two ever have. I am not lonely. I am finally free." Celine, realizing the tears weren't working and the threats were useless, changed tactics one last time. She dropped her voice, trying to channel the sweet girl from scene 2 again. "Rory, please. Let's just talk about the transfer. I'll make it up to you. I'll come home for the summer. I'll help you with your art. Please, just the first semester. We can put the rest back into your account." This was the most dangerous bait. The offer of my long-lost granddaughter's presence, the promise of the U.S. I craved. I felt a momentary tremor of weakness. Just one semester. Then I remembered the text. She always melts with that whole family-first crap. The betrayal was too recent, the calculation too clear. "No, Celine," I said, shaking my head slowly. "The person you are trying to talk to, the woman who melts, is no longer accepting calls at this number. She has retired. She has a plane ticket to London and a kiln full of new possibilities. Find your own way to Pratt. I found mine." I walked over to the telephone table and picked up the phone. I didn't need to call the police, but I needed a final barrier. I held the receiver and stared at them both. Blair grabbed Celine's arm. "Come on. She's gone crazy. She's finally cracked. We'll figure something else out." They left as abruptly as they arrived, the heavy slam of the door echoing the finality of their departure. The silence that followed wasn't merely the absence of noise. It was a loud, triumphant vacuum. I walked back to my studio, my heart still pounding, and picked up a piece of the wet earthenware clay. I didn't melt. I didn't break. I fired. I was harder, more resilient, and perfectly molded for the challenge ahead. The next day, I was scheduled to meet the gallery assistant to finalize the lighting plan for the exhibition. My true work was just beginning. The day after Blair and Celine's desperate final visit, I felt a calm I hadn't known in decades. The house was quiet, the smell of fresh clay and firing glazes replacing the lingering scent of old obligation. I drove into Boston to meet with Dana Rossi at the unnamed brand gallery in the South End. The space was sleek, minimalist, and perfectly primed for the exhibition. The Fragments of a Broken Promise collection was already installed, bathed in specific directional lighting that highlighted the intentional, sharp fissures in the ceramics. Dana met me at the door, her eyes shining. "Aurora, this is spectacular. The pieces look hard-edged, almost confrontational. They don't just sit there, they demand attention." The centerpiece was the original vessel, the rejected gift, displayed on a low, central plinth. It was no longer pale and unassuming. I had refired it with a deep, volcanic, unnamed brand red glaze. The glaze had intensified the texture and the crude, painful imperfections Celine had mocked. "The title is working for us, too," Dana reported, checking the online metrics on her tablet. "The story resonated globally. We've had inquiries from major collectors, and a feature article is running in the unnamed brand art review tomorrow. People aren't buying the pottery, they're buying the reckoning." As we finalized the lighting, the gallery assistant Marcus, a young man with sharp eyes, came over. "Ms. Marsh, I just finished setting up the QR code. We decided to link it directly to the video feed." "Video feed?" I asked, confused. Dana smiled. "A little theatrical flair. Remember that private security camera feed we set up in your studio garage just to monitor the kiln temperatures?" I nodded. "We edited it," Dana explained. "The public QR code links to a silent, time-lapse video showing the original vessel's final, violent moment. You smashing it. We play the smashing, then immediately cut to the finished, refired piece on the plinth. It perfectly captures the theme: destruction and recreation." I felt a surge of professional admiration for Dana. She hadn't just given me an exhibition, she had weaponized my story, turning my act of defiance into a piece of performance art. The humiliation of the past was now the trailer for my success. Later that afternoon, I stopped at my unnamed brand bank to handle a routine deposit. While speaking with my personal banker, Mr. Chow, he looked uneasy. "Mrs. Marsh, I feel I must inform you of some unusual activity we flagged this morning," Mr. Chow said quietly, leaning closer. "A large deposit was attempted this morning into the account you recently withdrew the tuition money from, the one you opened for your granddaughter, Celine." "A large deposit? From whom?" "The payer was Blair Sterling, your daughter. The amount was the $48,000 needed for the first semester's tuition deposit at Pratt. The source was a recent loan against your daughter's home equity." I understood immediately. Blair had been forced to liquidate her own resources, likely frantic to save her daughter's prestigious future, and, more importantly, to stop Celine from turning on her after I cut them off. The problem for them was that the account was no longer in use, and I had changed the primary beneficiary. "And you accepted the deposit?" Mr. Chow shook his head. "No. The account now requires my authorization for any incoming deposits over $5,000, a measure you instituted last year, I recall, to protect it from unauthorized large transfers. I was instructed by you to call you before accepting any large sum from Blair." He slid the rejection slip across the desk. "I rejected the $48,000 deposit. It has been returned to the source account." The rejection was final. Blair had thrown her own financial stability into the fire just to keep Celine quiet and maintain the illusion of control, and I had simply slammed the door shut. She was now paying the price for the Pratt tuition out of her own pocket, while I still held the original capital. Excellent, Mr. Chow, I said, a slow, cold smile touching my lips. Thank you for following those precise instructions. That evening, I returned home, weary but invigorated. I sat in my studio, watching the red glow of the kiln, processing the day's events. My art was praised, my revenge was working, and Blair had been forced to burn her own resources. I pulled out my legal documents, the trust, the wills, and the formal documents related to my late husband's estate. It was time to update my will. The original version, decades old, left everything to Blair, with a secondary trust set up for Celine upon her 25th birthday. I called Carolyn Hayes, the sharp lawyer from the previous script, and scheduled an urgent meeting. The time for ambiguity is over, Carolyn, I stated. I need the old will completely revoked. I need every asset, the house, the investments, and the trust funds, to be protected from my daughter and granddaughter permanently. Understood, Carolyn replied. We can set up a new irrevocable trust. It can be structured to pay certain beneficiaries while protecting the principal from outside claims. No, I clarified. I want the new primary beneficiary to be the unnamed brand center for ceramic arts. I want a significant portion to fund a new Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship for female artists over the age of 60. And I want the secondary beneficiary, a small but substantial amount, to go to Marcus, the gallery assistant who understood the narrative of the shattered vessel. Carolyn paused. And Blair and Celine? A $1 bequest for each, I said simply. A clear, unmistakable legal declaration that they are not forgotten. They are simply disinherited due to systematic betrayal and attempted emotional manipulation. $1, Carolyn repeated, a rare look of surprise on her face. That is final. It is honest, I corrected. They taught me the true value of my resources, and now I am ensuring those resources go to people who understand the value of passion and loyalty. They chose money and cruelty over family. I am choosing art and legacy over blood. The act of signing the new documents a few days later was the true completion of my freedom. I had saved the money not for Celine's future, but for the future of my unseen canvas, my own postponed legacy. My true work and my true life could now begin. The night of the exhibition opening was a stunning blur of success. The unnamed brand gallery was packed with collectors, critics, and fellow artists. The energy was electric, fueled by the quality of the work and the powerful backstory that Dana Rossi had meticulously cultivated. I stood near the entrance, dressed in a simple, deep blue velvet tunic, feeling like a celebrity for the first time in my life. I was introduced not as Blair's mother or Celine's grandmother, but as Aurora Marsh, the artist. The Fragments of a Broken Promise collection was a sensation. Critics praised the technical mastery and the raw, emotional honesty. The volcanic red rejected gift vessel was the star. People clustered around the central plinth, scanning the QR code that played the silent, time-lapse video of me deliberately shattering the original piece before the re-fired version appeared. It's an act of beautiful aggression, Aurora, a major collector, MS Eliza Reed, told me, her eyes lingering on one of the cracked bowls. You took the betrayal and transformed it into a new, uncompromising language. That's rare. Dana was beaming. We've sold every piece in the collection, Aurora, and the centerpiece, the vessel. We're negotiating a final offer that is 10 times the asking price. That $48,000 is now a rounding error. I felt a quiet pride. My talent, once dismissed as a glorified hobby, was now yielding financial, artistic, and emotional returns far greater than the original tuition fund. I noticed a sudden commotion near the gallery door. Marcus, the young assistant, approached me quickly. "Ms. Marsh, your daughter and granddaughter are here." I took a deep, steadying breath. Of course they are. Where there's a spectacle, they'll find a way in. Blair and Celine were unmistakable. They hadn't come to support me. They had come to reclaim a narrative. Blair was wearing a frantic, fixed smile, and Celine looked pale, but was clutching a small, expensive-looking handbag. Blair, maneuvering with the practiced ease of a social climber, immediately began working the room. "Rory, this is fabulous!" she exclaimed loudly, throwing her arms around me for a performative hug that I endured stiffly. "We are so proud. I mean, who would have thought a hobby could turn into this?" She turned to MS Reed, the major collector. "I'm Blair Sterling, Aurora's daughter. We've been supporting Mom's pottery for years. We always knew she had it in her. I'm actually the one who convinced her to invest in the new kiln." Miss Reed's expression went from admiration to cool suspicion. Celine, following her mother's lead, rushed to the central plinth. She placed her hand possessively on the plinth next to the rejected gift vessel. "And this piece? The red glaze is my favorite. I remember when Grandma made the original for me. It was supposed to be my graduation gift. It's so special to our family." The public nature of the lie, the immediate attempt to co-opt my success, was galling. But I was no longer the shrinking woman who worried about scenes. I smiled, a genuinely cold, slow smile, and addressed the small crowd that had gathered, including a few journalists. "It's a beautiful story, isn't it, Celine?" I asked, my voice ringing clearly in the gallery space. "A story of a gift, a promise, and a lesson. But I'm afraid Celine and Blair are slightly misrepresenting the history." I turned to the nearest journalist. "The original piece was not a gift of love, but a transaction. I promised the tuition in exchange for their respect and loyalty. When they publicly mocked my work as a stupid, ugly ceramic pot and used my love as emotional bait, they unilaterally broke that contract." I pointed to the QR code. "The video you just watched shows me shattering the original piece. That was me symbolically destroying the emotional contract they violated. And the piece you see now, the finished vessel, it is no longer theirs. It is the core of my new legacy. The tuition money they forfeited is now part of the Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship for Struggling Female Artists." The crowd murmured. Celine's face flushed deep red, and Blair's fixed smile evaporated. Blair, realizing she was losing control, hissed at me. "You spiteful old woman. This is about the money. You promised her Pratt. You're ruining her life." "I'm funding my own," I countered, my voice low and firm. "You taught me the high cost of a promise broken. Now you pay the price for that lesson. Your $48,000 tuition money is now helping women who deserve it. It is justice, Blair." Celine, seeing her prestige and financial future dissolving in public, snapped. She grabbed the $10,000 price tag off a nearby piece of ceramic and crumpled it in her hand, her eyes full of venom. "You're a failure, Rory. You always were. No one cares about your stupid old hobby," she shrieked. A security guard immediately moved toward her. Dana stepped in, protecting her investment. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you both to leave. You are disrupting a private event." Blair, now fighting a losing battle against the guard, grabbed Celine by the arm. "Come on, this isn't over. We'll contest the will. We'll sue you for the house. You can't do this to your own blood." "I can," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet absolute. Because I just did. And the last lawyer who challenged me on this matter was Blair's own husband, and I won that too. Save your money for your own legal fees, Blair. They were escorted out, their loud, self-pitying protests echoing down the street, their humiliation witnessed by dozens of Boston's elite. I turned back to MS Reed, who was holding a glass of champagne, regarding me with renewed respect. "Aurora," she said quietly, "I'll take the entire fragments collection, every piece, and I will ensure every major museum knows the story behind the vessel." The final confirmation of my victory wasn't the money, the sales, or the accolades. It was the knowledge that Blair and Celine had invested their last reserves of emotional capital into sabotaging my success, and they had failed spectacularly, instead serving as the final dramatic flourish to my own artistic triumph. The next day, I called Carolyn Hayes. "It's time to finalize the Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship," I instructed, "and send a copy of the final will to Blair and Celine's last known address. I want them to know exactly what they chose to throw away." My true legacy, the unseen canvas, was now fully funded. The week following the exhibition opening was marked by a palpable shift in power. Aurora Marsh was now a renowned artist, and Blair and Celine were viral figures of public scorn, their names whispered with a mixture of pity and contempt in art circles. My attorney, Carolyn Hayes, called me to confirm the final legal maneuver. "The new will is filed, executed, and immutable, Aurora," Carolyn stated. "The Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship is fully funded and protected within the new irrevocable trust." Blair and Celine received their registered letters this morning, each containing a notarized copy of the will with the $1 bequest clearly highlighted. "What was the reaction?" I asked, feeling a detached curiosity. "Predictable," Carolyn reported dryly. "Blair's attorney, the one I beat in court 2 years ago, immediately filed a motion to challenge the will based on undue influence and testamentary capacity. They're claiming you were mentally unstable due to grief and manipulated by self-serving art dealers, meaning Dana Rossi, into disinheriting your own blood. And your response?" "I filed a motion for dismissal, attaching 3 key exhibits. First, the current market valuation of your sold-out collection, demonstrating clear financial acumen and judgment. Second, the public video of Celine mocking your work as ugly just days before you signed the will, establishing motive for disinheritance. And third, the final rejected bank deposit slip, proving Blair herself validated your decision to use the funds elsewhere by attempting to repay the tuition after you withdrew the money. In short, they provided us with the perfect evidence to shut down their own lawsuit," I summarized. "Precisely. Their desperation is our evidence. They have zero legal basis to challenge the will, and they are burning their own house equity to pay my fees. The civil suit will be dismissed, and they will be liable for our costs." The satisfaction was not just in the victory, but in the efficiency of the justice. Their own greed, entitlement, and poor judgment had provided the perfect legal insulation for my new life. The next attempt came not through the courts, but through a channel I had thought permanently closed: Celine's personal email. I found a long, rambling message in my junk folder, signed only with "Your granddaughter." "Rory, I know you saw me at the gallery. I know what you did with the money, and I know you got the letter about my $1. It's disgusting. It's evil. You're destroying me out of spite. I didn't get the financing for Pratt. I lost the acceptance. My life is ruined because of your petty revenge. I have nothing. Mom is frantic about the house loan. She won't talk to me. We are completely alone. But I remember the good times, Rory. I remember us. You taught me how to throw a pot when I was little. You were the only one who believed in my talent. We were a team. Please, Rory. I don't need the whole inheritance. Just the tuition money. If I could reapply next year, I promise I'll change. I'll be the girl you wanted. I'll come live with you this summer. I'll help you run the fellowship. I'll even apologize for the text. Just give me one more chance. Don't let your bitterness destroy the only future I ever wanted. I love you. Your granddaughter. I read the email twice. The mixture of genuine regret, desperate pleading, and the underlying transactional calculation was heartbreakingly familiar. She offered the ultimate emotional bait, the return to us, the promise of the sweet girl I had sacrificed for. I felt a pang, not of weakness, but of profound sorrow for the woman Celine could have been. But I had learned my lesson. An offer of love made from a position of financial desperation is not love. It is a desperate attempt to reset the contract. I didn't delete the email. I forwarded it to Carolyn Hayes with one line. Exhibit D, the continuation of emotional blackmail. Then I sat down and typed a single, final, devastating response from my new, clean email address. Celine, your future was conditional on respect and loyalty. You failed both conditions. Your acceptance to Pratt was conditional on the first deposit. You failed that condition. I have fulfilled my promise. The money is invested in a future that honors talent and integrity. That future now belongs to other women. I wish you well in finding alternative resources. I am no longer your default fund. I am now your legacy, and it is a legacy of hard truth. Do not contact me again. Aurora Marsh. Founder, the Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship. A month later, the first iteration of the Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship was officially launched. The ceremony was held at the unnamed Brand Center for Ceramic Arts. It was a joyful, life-affirming event. The inaugural recipient was Ms. Beatrice Chen, a 65-year-old retired teacher from Queens who had dreamed of being a ceramicist her entire life, but lacked the funds for proper equipment and studio time. Her face, tear-streaked and luminous, was a mirror of the joy I had suppressed for so long. This fellowship isn't just money, Aurora, Beatrice whispered, holding the certificate. It's permission. It's validation that our dreams still matter, even when we're told our time is over. I understood completely. I hadn't just saved money. I had bought a new life for myself and granted permission for others to live theirs. Marcus, the gallery assistant who received a substantial secondary bequest in my will, came over to thank me. He had used his funds to open his own small gallery, dedicated to showcasing emerging female artists. You didn't just give me capital, Ms. Marsh, he said. You gave me conviction. You taught me that the story behind the art is the most valuable part. Later, sitting in my now famous studio, watching the red glow of the kiln, I felt the final, definitive victory. Blair and Celine were now struggling to maintain their own house, their roles reversed. They were the ones in financial peril, haunted by the specter of the wealth they had scorned and lost. I picked up a piece of smooth, cool clay. I didn't feel rage or spite. I felt the quiet, powerful satisfaction of a great artist who had finally found her medium, not just clay, but consequence. My revenge wasn't a moment of fury. It was a permanent, beautiful, and ongoing structure. The unseen canvas was now a fully realized masterpiece. My new life, once a quiet, frugal retirement, was now a vibrant, public force, forever protected from the very people who had tried to steal it. 3 months after the exhibition and the disinheritance, The legal battle initiated by Blair and Celine challenging the new will had stalled. Carolyn Hayes had filed a motion for summary judgment, citing the overwhelming evidence of their manipulative behavior and my proven mental competence. My routine was now centered entirely on my art and the Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship. I was reviewing applications for the second round of grants when the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number from New York. Mrs. Marsh? This is Dr. Sharon Wesley. I'm a counselor at Pratt Institute. I apologize for the unusual contact, but I feel I must speak with you regarding Celine. A counselor from Pratt. My heart tightened slightly, but I maintained a steady voice. I am no longer financially responsible for Celine, doctor. She missed her enrollment deadline. I am aware of that, Mrs. Marsh. This isn't about tuition. Celine reached out to the department, extremely distressed. She's filing police reports. Police reports? I interrupted, surprised. Yes, against her mother, Blair. Celine is claiming Blair used a significant portion of the money intended for Celine's college fund, plus the $48,000 home equity loan that was rejected, not for tuition, but to cover Blair's own mounting, undeclared gambling debts. A cold, clinical understanding settled over me. Blair hadn't just sacrificed her house equity for Celine's tuition. She had thrown away her family's last financial reserves to pay off a desperate secret. She was the true predator, masking her own financial destruction behind Celine's educational dream. She's turning on her mother, I murmured. It appears so, Dr. Wesley confirmed. Celine is demanding legal action against Blair for financial negligence and emotional abuse, citing the years of emotional bait used to manipulate you. It seems the structure they built to deceive you is now collapsing on itself. Thank you, doctor, I said, a profound sense of finality washing over me. You've confirmed the consequences of their choices. I believe Ms. Carolyn Hayes is familiar with the family's legal history. She can advise Celine if she chooses to pursue legal action. I hung up. The legal battle over my money was over, but the reckoning between mother and daughter had just begun. 2 weeks later, Carolyn confirmed the escalating disaster. The lawsuit challenging your will was dismissed with prejudice, Aurora. They lost, and we won attorney's fees, Carolyn reported. But the real news is that Blair has filed for bankruptcy. Gambling? A large part of it. But the $48,000 home equity loan she took out and tried to deposit into Celine's account, the one we rejected, was the final straw. She used those funds to stave off creditors, believing she could replace them later. When the funds were rejected and the Pratt deadline passed, Celine went nuclear. Carolyn summarized the tragic irony. The money you saved for Celine's future wasn't just lost. It became the pivot point for Blair's self-destruction. She lost her house equity, her financial stability, and now she is facing a lawsuit from her own daughter. And Celine? She's living with a friend. She's genuinely heartbroken and confused, now realizing her mother was the primary manipulator all along, using the grandmother's failing health narrative as a cover for her own debts. Carolyn paused. She called me Aurora. She apologized. A real, raw apology, not the calculated kind. What did she say? She said, "My grandmother was right. I judged her by her ability to pay, not by her love. And now I have nothing left but the truth." She asked if you would ever forgive her. I looked out at the ocean, the familiar rhythmic roar of the waves, a soothing sound. Forgiveness. It was a kind word, but irrelevant. I didn't need to forgive them. I just needed to be free of them. Tell Celine, Carolyn, I instructed. Tell her that the only person who can truly forgive her is herself. And tell her that I am funding a fellowship for young artists next year. She can apply, but she will be judged only on the quality of her work and her character, not on her last name. There are no special contracts here. It was the ultimate offering, a chance to succeed on her own merit, free of the financial shortcuts that had ruined her family. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I deliberately called Blair's last known cell number. "Hello?" Blair's voice was small, defeated, and devoid of its usual aggressive confidence. "Blair, it's me." "Aurora," I said. "I spoke to Carolyn. I know you lost the house and filed for bankruptcy." There was a moment of silence, then a choked sob. "You called to gloat? Isn't the $1 enough?" "I called to tell you this. I did not cause your ruin. Your gambling debts and your choice to take the home equity loan, the one I rejected, caused your ruin. You lost your home. You lost your financial stability. You lost your daughter's trust. You did this to yourself." "But the money was mine," she cried, the old sense of entitlement flaring briefly. "No, Blair, it was mine. And the money I did save for Celine's education, the $10,000 I gave her every year, you took that too. I cut off the resource you were actively destroying. I simply protected my assets from a known financial risk, a risk that happened to be my own daughter." I paused, delivering the final, definitive blow. "You taught me the true cost of emotional bait. Now you are paying the price for that lesson. I am free. You are not. Do not contact me again." I hung up, placing the phone gently back on its cradle. The emotional cord, severed a year ago, was now completely dissolved. I had not just won. I had ensured their failure was purely self-inflicted. My revenge was complete. 6 months after the final phone call, I sat with the selection committee for the second annual Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship. We were down to the final 2 applicants. The head of the committee, Dr. Chloe Vance, presented the 2 files. "The first is Ms. Rachel Lynn," Dr. Vance began. "Exceptional technique, professional resume, highly innovative in glaze application, a safe, high-caliber choice." "And the second?" I asked. "The second is simply Celine, Doctor," Vance said, flipping the file open. "The work is raw. Technically, it has flaws, firing issues, stress fractures in the clay, but the artist's statement is the most compelling piece we've ever received. She writes about the beauty of necessity, about building a studio in a public university dormitory and funding her own supplies through waitressing." I nodded, the memory of Celine's desperate, unglazed pot vivid in my mind. "Her statement includes a passage," Dr. Vance read aloud. "I learned that the highest price of art is not the material cost, but the honesty. My work is fractured because my life was fractured. I am applying because I believe in the integrity of the process, a lesson taught to me by the one person who refused to let me cheat my way out of consequence." I smiled, a slow, genuine expression of pride. Celine hadn't just changed. She had transformed. She had accepted the hard truth of the clay. "The money is not for technique," I told the committee. "The money is for honesty. The fellowship is for the person who needs permission and purpose, not just a career boost." "We understand, Mrs. Marsh," Dr. Vance said. "We unanimously recommend Celine." I signed the selection sheet. The full cycle of the rejected gift was complete. The money I had saved had returned to the intended recipient, but only after she had proven she deserved it on her own merit, free of the original poisoned contract. I flew to Oregon the following week. It wasn't just to award the fellowship, it was to close the final emotional loop. I found Celine in a cramped shared studio space on campus, her hands covered in clay, her face smudged but focused. She looked up, saw me, and froze. The old panic was gone, replaced by a deep, startled surprise. "Rory," she whispered, rising slowly. "Hello, Celine," I said, handing her the official certificate. "Congratulations. You earned this entirely on the merits of your passion and your honesty." Tears immediately sprang to her eyes, but they were different. Tears, not performative, but relieved. I didn't think I had a chance. I didn't even use my last name." "I know," I said. "That's why you won. You showed integrity. That's the only currency that matters in the world I now inhabit." We talked for an hour, not about the money or the betrayal, but about the properties of high-fire glaze and the difficulty of finding good kaolin clay. She told me about her meager savings and her job. She asked about the Arthur and Aurora Marsh Fellowship and its recipients. "I have to ask, Rory," she finally said, her voice shaking slightly. "My mother, Blair, what happened to her?" "She is starting over too," I replied simply. "She is rebuilding her life from scratch, without the pretense of wealth. She is learning the same lesson you are. Life costs money, and money must be earned honestly. That is the final truth she has to live with." "I think I need to forgive her, eventually," Celine said, looking down at the clay on her hands. "Then do it for yourself, not for her," I advised. That is the definition of true freedom. 2 years later, I stood in my magnificent new seaside home, a custom-built house in Marblehead, funded entirely by the proceeds of the second and third sold-out collections and investment returns from the Arthur Trust. The house was not ostentatious. It was designed around the light and the sea, with a vast, state-of-the-art studio. I was finishing a large ceramic mural, a commission for the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. My phone buzzed. It was a photo from Celine. She was standing in front of her own small, dedicated kiln, newly purchased with her fellowship money. The photo showed her smiling, triumphant. She was not a rich girl. She was a focused, working artist. My revenge was not a moment of destruction. It was an act of creation, a legacy that would continue to change lives long after I was gone. I picked up the original rejected gift vessel, the red volcanic piece, now permanently housed in my new library. It was no longer a symbol of pain. It was the trophy of the unseen canvas, the masterpiece of my final, formidable chapter. I was Aurora Marsh, the patron, the artist, and the woman who taught her family that love, unlike money, cannot be successfully extorted. The final canvas is complete. The money is safe. The legacy is secured. My revenge wasn't destruction, it was creation. Your story is your art. If you have transformed betrayal into triumph, we want to hear it. Send your powerful true story to womenstoriess@sedgmail.com. Like, subscribe, and continue turning pain into power.